Have you ever just, turned on your tap, filled up a glass with clean water, and maybe thought for a second about the incredible system that actually brings it to you?
It's something we definitely take for granted, right?
For sure. For many of us, it's
Yeah.
just there, a daily essential. But that's really not the story everywhere in the world. It's dramatically different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Millennium Development Goals, they made huge strides. Something like 2.6 billion people got access to better water sources, which is amazing.
Impressive number.
But even with that progress, back in 2015, there were still, 663 million people without even that basic access.
Wow.
And it really highlights global inequality, as you said.
And the research really drills down on who's most affected. It's disproportionately people in rural areas, the poor, and very often it's women and children. They're the ones spending hours collecting water, which means missing school, unbelievable physical strain.
Yeah, the burden is huge.
Think about it. Piped water, the kind that comes right to your house, serves almost 80% of people in cities.
Right.
But only about a third of people in rural areas. Big gap.
Which is exactly why the new goals, the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, are so much more ambitious.
More ambitious how?
Well, the aim now is universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. And the key change is the focus shifting from just improved sources to safely managed water.
Okay, safely managed. What does that mean in practice?
It means the water source is actually on the premises, like in your home or yard.
Right there.
Right. And it's available when you need it, and critically, it's free of contamination, safe to drink.
And our source material makes it pretty clear that piped water, getting it right to the house, is kind of seen as the best way to meet that higher standard.
It really is, especially because it's so strongly linked to better health. It's like the gold standard for public health officials.
Okay, so we know money is a factor, resources are a factor, that's obvious. But what if there's something else going on, something less tangible?
Exactly. Beyond the economics, beyond the actual water availability, what else might influence whether a country decides to, build these big, complex pipe systems? And the source we're looking at today points to something, well, honestly, pretty surprising.
You mean like a country's culture
Yeah.
affecting its pipes? That does sound surprising.
Yeah.
I'd usually just think, okay, it's GDP or do they have enough rivers, that sort of thing.
Me too, initially.
So, okay, listeners, get ready. We are about to do a deep dive into how these, invisible cultural values might actually predict how water infrastructure gets built. Consider this your shortcut to getting smart on a really critical global issue.
Okay, so let's get into the research itself. We're drawing on a study by Jessica A. Kaminsky.
Right.
She looked at 33 different nations over a period from 1990 to 2012.
Okay, quite a range.
Yeah, and her goal was basically to understand the cultural work that piped water does. Like, how does this kind of infrastructure fit with a nation's underlying values and preferences?
And to measure those values, she used Hofstede's cultural dimensions. People might have heard of this.
Probably. It's a pretty well-known framework for comparing cultures, based on lots of survey data.
And it's really important to stress, these dimensions, they aren't judgments, right? Like high or low isn't good or bad.
Exactly. They're just descriptive. They show averages of preferences within a society, not whether one way is better.
Got it. So how did the study make sure it was really isolating culture and not just, say, wealth?
Good question. They were really careful about controlling for other big factors. Things you'd expect to matter.
Like
GDP per person, obviously. Also, where the country started from in 1990, its baseline piped water coverage.
okay, makes sense.
Plus the percentage of people living in cities and even how much fresh water the country has per capita.
So they try to account for all the usual suspects.
Pretty much. It was a robust approach. The idea was to see if culture still had something unique to say, even after all that.
All right, so after controlling for all those economic and resource factors, what did they find? What was the first big cultural connection?
The first really significant cultural factor was power distance. PDI for short.
Power distance.
Okay.
Refresh my memory. That's about hierarchy, how unequal power is distributed and how okay people are with that.
That's the one. It reflects how much the less powerful members of a society sort of accept and even expect inequality. Think preferences for hierarchies, centralized decisions.
Right. So how does that connect to water pipes?
Well, the study found a really strong link. Countries with higher power distance scores tended to have more access to piped water, right to the premises.
Interesting. Across the board.
Across urban, rural, and the national level overall. Actually, for the national and urban levels, PDI was the single most statistically significant cultural factor.
Huh. That actually kind of clicks. Piped water systems are pretty hierarchical, aren't they? Big, complex networks.
Exactly. They usually need centralized management, lots of formal rules.
So the research is suggesting that these systems, at least how we currently build them, are just a better cultural fit in places that are already comfortable with that kind of top-down structure.
That seems to be the implication.
But that raises a big question then, doesn't it? What about places with low power distance? Places less keen on inequality or rigid hierarchies? Does this mean piped water just isn't a good fit there? Or could we design them differently?
That is the million-dollar question this research surfaces. It strongly suggests we might need to think about alternative designs or management models for those contexts. Maybe more decentralized, maybe involving local communities more. It's a really important point for future projects.
Absolutely. Food for thought there. Okay, what was the next cultural dimension?
Next up was uncertainty avoidance, or UAI.
Uncertainty avoidance. So how much a society dislikes ambiguity and, well, uncertainty?
Precisely. High UAI means people feel uncomfortable with the unknown. They like clear rules, structure, predictability.
And how that play out with water infrastructure?
Also a very clear connection. Higher UAI scores strongly predicted more access to piped water, again, across urban, rural, and national levels.
Okay.
And interestingly, in the rural context, uncertainty avoidance was actually the most dominant variable, statistically speaking.
Why do you think that is? What's the connection?
Well, think about what technology often does for us. It helps manage uncertainty, right? It structures things.
Sure.
And piped water seems to do exactly that. It reduces all sorts of uncertainties like, will there be enough water today? Is it safe to drink? Am I going to get sick? How much time will I spend fetching it?
Right. It makes a fundamental part of life much more predictable. Takes away a whole layer of daily worry.
Exactly. It streamlines things.
It makes you wonder, beyond those obvious things, what other, maybe more subtle uncertainties you, our listeners, think reliable water might reduce, especially in really different environments, like, say, drought-prone areas or places with unpredictable weather.
That's a good question. Okay, moving on. The third dimension was individualism versus collectivism, or IDV.
Right. This is about whether people prioritize individual goals and immediate family or group loyalty and collective well-being.
That's it. Loose-knit versus tight-knit social fabric.
And the finding here was a bit different, wasn't it?
It was. This is where it gets really interesting. Higher individualism scores did predict more piped water access, but only in rural areas.
Mostly rural. No significant link in cities or overall.
Nope, not statistically significant in the urban or national aggregate data.
Okay, that feels counterintuitive. I mean, isn't a big water network fundamentally a collective effort?
You'd think so, right? From an engineering perspective, it's obviously a shared network, but the study suggests that, at least in these highly individualistic rural settings, the users perceive it differently.
How so?
They seem to see the connection primarily as an individual benefit to their own household or family. It's about my tap, my convenience, my family's health, less about the shared system.
A personal gain within a collective system. Why the difference between rural and urban, though?
Yeah.
Any theories?
The paper offers a couple of possibilities. One is that in cities, the system is just so much bigger and more obviously centralized. Maybe that collective nature is harder to ignore. It might clash a bit with a purely individualistic view.
Whereas in the countryside.
Right. Maybe in rural areas, individuals or smaller groups might have more agency in actually getting smaller, more isolated systems built. Or maybe it's just easier to frame it as a direct household upgrade when you're connecting to a less massive network.
There's definitely nuance finding.
Yeah.
Requires more digging, probably.
For sure. And just as a quick note, they also looked at the masculinity-femininity dimension, MAS.
Yeah.
No significant link there. So things like framing water access as an environmental issue or maybe getting a tap as a status symbol, those don't seem to be major drivers for building the infrastructure itself, according to this data.
Okay. So we've got these cultural factors, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism in rural areas showing real predictive power. But we shouldn't forget the basics, right? The stuff we normally think about.
Absolutely not. And the study confirms their importance because it controlled for them. They still matter.
So just to recap those.
Sure. Unsurprisingly, richer countries, higher GDP per capita, tend to have more piped water.
That makes sense.
Countries that started with very low coverage in 1990 built more like they were playing catch-up.
Also logical.
Having more freshwater resources per person also correlated with more piped access, maybe because it allows for those bigger centralized sources that work well with pipes?
Right. Easier to pipe from one big river than lots of small wells?
Essentially. And finally, increases in the urban population were also linked to more piped water construction. Urbanization drives infrastructure.
Okay. So those factors are definitely in the mix. But the main headline here, connecting it all back, is that even when you account for all of that,
Culture still matters. These dimensions, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, they add something distinct to the explanation. They have real predictive power on their own.
so it's not just about money or migration or water sources. Culture is this other crucial, often invisible layer.
Exactly. Which leads us to the so what? What do we do with this information?
Right. What are the real-world implications for, say, engineers or policymakers trying to get safe water to everyone?
Well, the big takeaway is that understanding these cultural values can genuinely help design and manage water systems that are more culturally appropriate, more likely to be accepted, used, and sustained long term.
Socially sustainable, not just technically feasible.
Precisely. Which should lead to better adoption, systems that last longer, and ultimately better health outcomes, which is the whole point.
So it's about tailoring the approach.
Yeah. The data suggests thinking about strategies that maybe emphasize the individual benefits, like reducing uncertainty, especially if that resonates locally, and crucially, matching the organizational structure, how the system is managed, how decisions are made.
Whether it's more top-down or more community-based.
Right. Match that structure to the local cultural preferences around hierarchy, the power distance dimension we talked about.
So if a place has low PDI, maybe a super centralized top-down management model isn't the best fit, even if it looks efficient on paper.
That's what this research implies. You might need a more horizontal, participatory approach for it to really take root and succeed.
Fascinating. And the study also points towards where more research is needed, right?
Definitely. There's a clear call for similar studies in African nations. They were underrepresented in this particular data set, but obviously face huge water access challenges. We need to see if these patterns hold there.
That seems critical.
And also doing more qualitative work, talking to people to really understand what kinds of uncertainty piped water reduces for them in their specific context, getting beyond assumptions.
Yeah, the why behind the numbers.
Exactly. And as we discussed, really exploring those less hierarchical designs for piped systems. What could they look like? How would they work in places that prefer flatter structures?
And also digging into that urban versus rural difference in perception.
Yeah.
How do people think about their water infrastructure depending on where they live? That could be key.
So wrapping up, we've seen today how these really deep-seated values we hold about authority, about dealing with the unknown, can actually subtly shape the physical world around us.
Yeah, even something as basic and essential as whether we have piped water coming into our homes.
It's a really powerful reminder, I think, that solutions, especially technological ones, aren't just technical. To be truly sustainable, they have to be deeply human. They have to fit the context.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. If culture shapes our water taps, what else in your life, maybe technologies you use, policies in your community, even just daily habits, might be doing some hidden cultural work that you've never really considered before?
It definitely makes you look at the world a bit differently.